What we're looking at here is Britain's most advanced aircraft carrier at sea on its maiden voyage to the Indo-Pacific. This £3.5 billion floating airfield, with £1 billion worth of F-35 fighter jets on her deck, is designed to project power wherever she goes. And we got to see firsthand exactly how she does it. From launching her aircraft to assembling the bombs they're armed with, and seeing how the crew of 1,600 people keep it all running like clockwork. This is how Britain rules the waves using one of the most powerful warships afloat today. This is the HMS Prince of Wales, one of two Queen Elizabeth-class carriers currently in service with the Royal Navy. We covered the ship in port in this video, but now we get to see her at sea and fully armed. The biggest difference is that she now has her air wing on board. This is the reason she is both so powerful and so feared. Dozens of fifth-generation F-35B stealth fighter bombers. The Prince of Wales is designed around these aircraft, which are the STOVL variant, which stands for Short Takeoff, Vertical Landing. This means exactly what it says. They're specially adapted to take off from short aircraft carrier decks and can land back on them vertically. That's why the Prince of Wales has this ramp at the front. It's crucial to giving the aircraft the extra bit of lift that they need to get airborne from such a short runway. And what all of this space at the back of the runway is for, allowing them to come in and land straight downwards. That's very different to most US aircraft carriers, which lose the ramp and use a pulley launch system to give the aircraft the extra lift instead. What the Prince of Wales and her crew are practicing right now is launching and then recovering, naval slang for landing, their F-35Bs. The aim is to get as many of them into the air as fast as they can and then get them all back down again safely. This requires skill and coordination on behalf of the crew and the pilots. The pilots, who you can see here, take their instructions from the ground crew, who you can see here. The job of the ground crew is to maneuver these £100 million jets carefully around the deck using a series of hand signals. They line them up for takeoff down the runway, which is here. When they're in position, the crew give the signal to launch. The jets fly up the ramp and then away to carry out their mission. And here's what it looks like as they come back to land. You can see how the jet motor tips downwards to allow them to land vertically. All of that is coordinated from this tower, or island in naval speak, which contains aircraft command. It is from here that missions are planned and executed, and the aircraft tracked during takeoff and landing. We got the opportunity to speak to the officer in charge about what it takes to plan and execute exercises such as this.
So we're now deployed on exercise Talisman Sabre, which is a headline exercise for our Carrier Strike 25 deployment. In order to really demonstrate that, what we're trying to do is do 2 waves of jet activity a day, each of those waves consisting of 8 jets. Within that wave launch, we'll look to get the 8 jets away within 7 to 8 minutes and then back on again. For the deployment, we've got 18 increasing to 24 UK sovereign jets, as well as 12 helicopters drawn from across both core naval aviation, that's Merlin Mark II, MPH and Airborne Search and Control, as well as Wildcat Mark II and Commando Merlin Mark IV from the Commando Helicopter Force. My role is control of flying. That's primarily managing the interface between air and the ship. So for all of our types, jets and helicopters, their performance for launch and landing is largely made safe by putting them in the correct wind envelope as determined by temperature, pressure, and the weight of the aircraft. In order to do that, as a moving airfield, we've got the advantage of being able to point into the wind or make our own through the ship's motion. So it's primarily my job to liaise with the bridge to make sure that happens, as well as liaising with the operations room and the principal wharf officer downstairs to make sure that our weapons and sensors are correctly made safe.
Talk to me a little bit about everyone's different roles up here, what we're seeing on the screens, and the kind of things you're sensing and detecting and picking up.
From the far left of the compartment, we have the landing signal officer, known as Paddles, who's a experienced and qualified F-35 pilot. Moving on from them, I have the tower controller. Their responsibility is that 5-mile, 2,500 foot donut around the ship. They're very much like a tower controller at an airfield ashore. So principally, we're blessed with these great big windows. and it is a visual control position, but they're also in extensive communications with the approach controller downstairs, who's making use of primarily radar 997 for control of aircraft outside of that 5-mile bubble. And clearly, should weather degrade inside those conditions, we can go to instrument recoveries and bring that range for radar control right in close. Then there's my desk in the middle, and to my right, the deck operations officer. His role is managing the movement of aircraft around the flight deck and to and from the hangar. This is currently both the smallest and the busiest airfield in UK defence, which means that clearly that job of moving things around the deck and getting them in the right place is a complex one. Between my job and his job, we make a plan how to do that safely, making sure everybody's got somewhere to come back to in the event of emergency, but also maximising efficiency. We've seen an enormous learning curve from what was already, before we deployed, a very advanced capability. The integration with international partners and also the tasking that we've seen thus far, starting with exercise MedStrike and then down through the Middle East region and down to here, has really brought on the capability with regards to concurrent operation of armed deck, really capitalise, of an armed deck, both with weapons and countermeasures, but also really capitalising on the inherent advantages of a stowable carrier to operate the flight deck in innovative ways with, for example, aft-facing departures and recoveries to maximise I talked before about the wind envelope, maximise the different wind envelopes that we can operate the aircraft in and take advantage of the inherent flexibility that we've got with vertical landings rather than arrested recoveries.
The F-35 is the main way the Prince of Wales attacks its enemies and defends itself. The ship is designed to carry 48 of these aircraft, stored either up here on the flight deck or immediately below it in a huge aircraft hangar with 2 elevators here and here to take them back and forth. As we've just seen, the jets maneuver around the deck and then launch off the ramp to get into the air. Once airborne, the F-35s are capable of flying up to 500 miles, carrying up to 18,000 pounds of bombs and missiles each. These jets are designed to use their stealth capabilities to sneak into an enemy country undetected before blowing up their anti-air defences and air force before it can even take off. Having neutered the enemy's ability to shoot them down, the F-35s are then free to roam the skies at will, destroying whatever else they like. Troops, tanks, enemy ships, headquarters, ammo dumps. If it can be seen from the air, they can hit it. If the enemy sends its own planes or warships to try and take out the Prince of Wales first, then the F-35s will help defend the ship. But they won't be alone. Aircraft carriers are big and vulnerable, so they'll always go to sea as part of a carrier strike group. This will normally include a frigate, whose job it is to hunt for submarines, a destroyer, whose job it is to blow up incoming missiles, an allied submarine, helicopters. You get the picture. Combine those with the F-35s and the anti-air defences on board the carrier itself, and you've got a pretty potent defence force. And the advantage of putting all that firepower on a ship is that it can sail anywhere in the world. So whoever the enemy is, you can probably strike at them. That's why aircraft carriers are both so feared and so respected. You'd think twice about picking a fight with a country that can park one of these just off your coastline. But for all of their abilities, the F-35s are only as good as the weapons they carry. So we went to see where those are prepared. This is the armory. What goes on down here is pretty top secret. While down here, we spoke to the officer in charge, who is known by his nickname, Bombs. We asked Bombs to explain what role he and his team play in making the aircraft carrier such a force to be reckoned with. So how long, generally speaking, do you have to get one of these weapons ready?
Before you make a cup of tea, we could have bombs here ready and prepped. The team you'll have just seen here is our utmost leanest, and it could be a minimum of 2 or a maximum of 40 or 50 people. It is a crowded and busy space, but we do have a number of weapon prep areas that we spread out amongst the entire ship. We'll have the ability to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's what that number of 50, 60 is, to allow us to have a sustained period of operations. Owning an air weapons department is like owning an F1 team. Every single engineer is like a small cog in a big machine, and they know their job, and they know their job inside and out. So what we do to kind of carry that synergy is to keep the teams in the same. So the same 3 people that would have started the deployment will be training together, eating together and all sorts to make sure they build up team chemistry. And then when it comes to bomb building, it's near enough second hand, because they'll know I need to do step 1, 2, 3, and 4. You need to do 5, 6, and 7, and so on and so on. And that's where you really get those marginal gains when you are building something as complex as a paveway 4. So if we receive a firing order, it's my job to ratify that firing order, given the constraints we have within the operating area, given the amount of munitions you have. It's my job to make sure that we can absolutely meet that firing order before we commit to say, yes, Commodore. The other side of the job is for magazine safety. So if there are any incidents on board, it's my job as the subject matter expert to advise command on what the type of munition is, how it can expend, or what damage it can cause on the ship, and what we can best do to mitigate that whilst the incident is going on. Inherently, this is a dangerous piece of kit, and there's people that sleep just above some of the deep magazines that we have. The aircraft carrier can execute a number of roles, whether it's anti-submarine warfare, anti-surface warfare, strike. We've got an amount of munitions that can deal with a number of scenarios. So if it's anti-submarine warfare, we have Stingray torpedoes on this ship, which have been around for a number of years, so it's definitely a proven capability. We have the ability to conduct air-to-air combat, so we have missiles, so medium-range missiles, short-range missiles on this ship, and then from a last line of defense side of things, we have a CWIS, which is a close-in weapon system, which is common across the entire fleet, which is used primarily for our defense. But again, going back to what we're trying to achieve, it very much depends on what the objective is, will depend on what you put in on this bench, essentially.
Obviously, working with such a large amount of explosives in the middle of a war zone is a dangerous undertaking. So as well as practicing bomb assembly, this crew also carry out extensive safety drills. Fire is one of the biggest threats they face, so they rehearse what to do in case one breaks out in the bomb bay. You can see the crew putting on fire retardant hoods to protect themselves from the flames, and grabbing hoses and extinguishers to put the blaze out. We spoke to the officer overseeing this training about what they're doing and why.
One of the major threats that we can have while we're prepping the weapons is fire. So we have our initial firefighting phase, which you saw. We do an LVA to establish that we've got a fire, then the other teams then react. We do our initial firefighting with the extinguisher, then we get the centre-fed hose reel. At the same time, the guys are putting on the emergency breathing apparatus and they come in and relieve the team till we've extinguished the fire. Everybody knows what to do, when to do it, and they react correctly so they minimise any extra risk. All the risks that we sort of have, we have all RAD has, we have a number of different issues that we can experience on here. So we have policy that drives us to make sure that we bring that risk as low as possible. All the guys adhere to it, and it's just in the eventuality of something going wrong, this is the way that we react and do these drills so that we can react to the real incident and make sure we're as safe as we possibly can.
While the carrier's air wing may be its party piece, there's a lot more that goes on to keep such a large vessel running smoothly. This is one of the engine rooms right at the bottom of the ship. The Prince of Wales has 4 diesel generators and 2 gas turbines, which together produce enough power to light up a town. Here you can see the top of one of the diesel generators. It's basically a huge car engine with 16 cylinders, one under each of these caps. And here's the bottom of the same engine. It's so large that you actually have to go down a set of steps to get to it. Here's the 2 huge exhausts, which take away the fumes from the burning fuel. They run all the way up through the ship and vent out of the top of the islands we saw on the deck. The engineers very kindly turned this engine off for us so we could go down and have a look at it. But as you can tell from the sweat beading on my forehead here, it was still very hot and very loud down there. We also got to poke our noses into the kitchens, which keep the crew fed. Almost 5,000 meals per day are prepared here. So everything this team of chefs do needs to be done at scale. They work with huge quantities of fresh ingredients. Here you can see the amount of meat required for just one of the 3 daily meal services. And here you can see the size of the pots they use to cook everything. They say an army marches on its stomach, and it seems a navy is no exception. All of which is very impressive. But does Britain really need 2 aircraft carriers? After all, the biggest threat Europe faces right now is from Russia, a land power. If Britain ever did get sucked into a war against Putin, it is unlikely that an aircraft carrier would be of much use. To understand why the UK is so invested in its carriers, you need to look beyond Europe's borders to the Indo-Pacific, which is where this training exercise took place. These seas are a very long way from home, but what happens here has global implications because it is through here that trillions of dollars in trade pass every year. Britain alone is thought to rely on these waters for around £100 billion worth of its GDP, equivalent to almost half of what the country spends on healthcare. So what happens in this part of the world has huge implications for what happens back home, no matter how far away it is. For decades, the security of these waters was guaranteed by the US, which has 11 aircraft carriers backed up by naval and air bases all over the region. America allows trade to flow freely back and forth, making everyone richer in the process. But in recent years, China has announced itself as a major maritime power in the region. It may only have 2 aircraft carriers right now, but a third is about to enter service and a fourth is already under construction. In fact, Beijing is building so many new ships that it is thought to construct the equivalent of the entire British Navy every 2 years. If that expansion continues, then it will not be long before Beijing is capable of challenging the US for control. A war here would cause major disruptions to trade and probably plunge the world into a deep recession. Worse, if China were to win that war, then even when trade restarted, Xi Jinping would be in control of it. Any country not marching to the beat of Beijing's drum could find themselves cut off again, forcing them to choose between their values and their wealth. That's why Britain sees having aircraft carriers as a key capability. First and foremost, they're designed to act as a deterrent. Just by dint of existing and taking part in exercises such as this one to show that they're battle-ready, Britain hopes to deter China from launching a war in the first place. And if such a war were ever to break out, Britain could participate in the defense of its interests rather than being forced to watch from the sidelines. Rather than asking whether or not we can afford such warships, the question then becomes whether we can afford not to have them. But don't just take our word for it. We spoke to the commanding officer of HMS Prince of Wales and the commodore of the entire carrier strike group for more information.
So we're off the northwest coast of Australia, having arrived here just a couple of days ago, and we're in the final week of preparation ahead of Exercise Talisman Sabre. This is all about the projection of F-35 and delivering multiple F-35s into that exercise every day, twice a day. The idea being at least 8 aircraft on each wave, 2 waves a day, and a significant contribution of 5th generation fighters to a really high-end exercise. We're in Prince of Wales right now. She is what we call a 5th generation aircraft carrier. We have built her deliberately from the keel up to support 5th generation F-35 Lightnings. So the whole tenet of a carrier strike group is to be able to project F-35 combat air mass at a time and a place of our choosing. That's really what it boils down to. We're a mobile airfield. We can move 500 miles a day. And as long as we're in international waters, we don't need anybody else's permission to do that. That's really powerful. We're well found. What does that mean? We've got our own hospital facilities, we've got our own ammunition facilities on board, we can service aircraft, jets and helicopters, we can feed 4,500 meals a day. And when you bring all of that together just in the carrier, you then need to put the force protection that goes with it. So I've got an air defence destroyer that provides the defensive in the air environment. I've got an anti-submarine warfare frigate, which provides me protection in the subsurface against submarines and surface ships. A tanker which gives us fuel so I can stay at sea for weeks and weeks on end. And more often than not, I've got a submarine with me as well. So you can see that we can operate this capability from what I call the seabed to space and within the electromagnetic environment and the cyber environment as well. So it's all encompassing. It's a joint integrated task group which brings a huge amount of capability to bear whenever we wish to. But it's everything from that sort of soft power edge of defence engagement and diplomacy. We've just done that in Singapore, all the way through to the combat edge of being able to deliver strike effect when we need to. But of course, we might need to go and do disaster relief. We might need to provide reassurance to partners and allies. So you can see you've just got this suite of options within a strike group, born of the carrier in the middle, and then all the other capabilities that come with it. We're the only nation in Europe right now that can deliver a 24/7 capability permanently. That's why we have 2 aircraft carriers, and alongside Italy, the only nation in Europe that can deliver with F-35 as well. One of our big drivers though is also to allow that to be international so that we can bring other nations in that aren't necessarily carrier nations. Norway's a really good example. They're a close ally of ours in the North Atlantic, along with Spain, being met by New Zealand and Australia. What a convening power that really is. So you're right, not many nations can do it.
And I think the UK has a real strength at being able to bring together an international community.
That's where this tape stops, but we'll be back soon to play you through another episode of War on Tape. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want more videos like this in your feed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.